All right, good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Sessions, Thursday, September 14th, 2023. It is 9:31 a.m. My name is Ty Mentzer, Vice Chair of the Board. Our Chair, Commissioner Mejia, is participating through Zoom, as is Commissioner Edwards. They'll be, I think, both joining us in the boardroom shortly. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. We have County Manager and Assistant County Managers, as well as budget staff. And we're just picking up with a longer agenda that's kind of stretched across the week regarding our budget, building our budget, and Assistant County Manager Campbell, where are we picking up this morning?
So we left off yesterday with the land use and permit fund, and we're gonna pick up with real estate excise tax technology fund this morning. And I'm gonna take that one. I'm gonna take this one. So you do not have a financial plan on this. This is a conversation I wanted to share with you about what is coming up. And I will also say that I apologize to the assessor. I've not had an opportunity to connect with him yet. If he or one of his staff are listening, I have an appointment with him this afternoon at 1 o'clock to discuss this with him, but now is the time that I'm sharing it with the board. You may recall that the Real Estate Excise Tax Technology Fund is a very small fund, and it has revenue that comes from the state based on excise tax collections from real estate transactions. And that money can only be used to improve the valuation process. It can be used by either the treasurer or the assessor. Those are the only two offices that can use this funding. And prior to the current board, the Board of County Commissioners at the time were visited by then Treasurer Sean Myers and Assessor Drew. They had determined that the treasurer's office at the time had no further uses for this funding, and the assessor could use it for an FTE. So the board at that time agreed to fund an FTE for the assessor's office doing assessments, to the extent that it could be funded through the technology fund. Well, over the course of the next few years, it was evident that fully funding an FTE in this fund would draw the fund down to where there was no money left. So you may recall that there is a proviso in your budget that allows the assessor to transfer the costs of the FTE that's authorized in the REIT Tech Fund. He can transfer part of those costs out of that fund to the general fund to the extent that his general fund budget allows. So that proviso gives him that authority. This year, I was contacted by our county treasurer, Jeff Gadman, who has determined at this point in time that it's time to upgrade the software that supports taxation and valuation of county properties. So the treasurer now has need of use of this fund. And the treasurer had talked to their civil attorney, Rick Peters, and gotten an assessment that because of the way the law is written, that the treasurer holds the account. And even though we all agreed that the fund is subject to appropriation by the Board of County Commissioners, the treasurer has some say, needs to have some say in how the fund is spent. So what Jeff and I agreed to, and what I'm proposing to the board, and we'll have a discussion later today with Stephen about, is we're proposing an MOU between the Board of County Commissioners, the treasurer, and the assessor that states basically that any appropriation from this fund needs to be agreed to by all three parties. And that both the treasurer and the assessor need to have access to the fund. So again, I'll be talking to the assessor this afternoon. Rick Peters, had the conversation with him. He thinks that that will, satisfy the different aspects of state law regarding this fund and budget and uses. And, what may ultimately occur is the Board of County Commissioners may need to more formally, define how the FTE that's currently funded in Stephen's office is funded in the long term and limit the amount that can be charged to REIT, rather than having this very fluid arrangement where Stephen can charge as much or as little as he sees fit to this fund. So that might be the impact of this conversation, but I do believe that an MOU is in order. And it is very much like what we do with the courts and the trial court improvement fund, where it's an agreement between the commissioners and district court and superior court on how those funds are spent. So that's what's going on with this fund.
Commissioner Edwards,
I don't have any questions on this, thank you.
Commissioner Mejia,
I'm still wrapping my head around it.
I know it's technical and a little bit complicated, but I will have a draft for you by early October of what the MOU will look like, or I will be bringing you the concerns of the assessor.
so I have some questions. So you said something about, Rick Peters says that the law says that the assessor must have input into the use of this fund?
Not the assessor, the treasurer.
Oh, the treasurer must
He
have it.
believes that the treasurer has to have some input because the law states, this is where it gets a little bit gray. The law states that the treasurer shall hold the fund. The funds shall be held by the treasurer. Well, there's a lot of laws that state that the county treasurer is gonna hold the funds, but that doesn't give him appropriation authority. Because at first the conversation was the Board of County Commissioners has no say in how this fund is spent, and it's like, nope. This is,
Who said that?
I said no. It's a special purpose fund, and nothing in state law says that it is not subject to RCW 3640, which is the rules around county budgets and appropriations, where the law clearly states that the state fund is not subject to state appropriation in the same chapter. So this was a discussion that Rick and I had, and Rick agreed that, okay, he could see where it's subject to appropriation by the Board of County Commissioners, but he still believes that our treasurer needs to have a say in how the money's spent. So we got there through this proposal of an MOU.
And his interpretation was the treasurer needs to have say, as well as the assessor, not only the assessor. Or is he saying the treasurer has say, but the assessor doesn't have say?
Yes, because it's the latter, because the law is silent as far as the county assessor. It's just that when the law enumerates the uses of the fund, it's clearly something the assessor does within the county.
and it's related to, what was the word you used? Valuation?
Valuation of property,
Okay,
which is, again, clearly the duty of the assessor. So it's, in my point of view, and Rick agreed, that the law is clear in the sense that the uses can be by either the assessor or the treasurer for this purpose. But he also says that since the treasurer is called out, Rick believes that the treasurer has a say in how it's spent.
so that's kind of behind the point, because we're gonna do this MOU and agree to that.
Yes,
But getting to the substantive issue, how much does the treasurer need for his software upgrade, and how much would that take from what the assessor is using it for?
we have not gotten that far yet.
So that's just more to come?
Yes,
Okay,
Another pressure to the general fund.
yes,
I mean,
because
that's
gonna-
that's the
it's
bottom
gonna shove the
line.
assessor's FTE
Yeah,
more,
because
at
right
least
now
some
the
portion
assessor
of
is
it back
being
to
able
the.
to manage the
Yeah.
FTE by able to work within the budget that you approve, general fund, and the REIT technology fund.
right,
Absent went out with this MOU, will eliminate that option and will put a pressure to the general fund.
that's true.
Just, I mean, that's,
I mean, the
the
alternative
result.
is to eliminate this FTE that the assessor has had, but I don't think anyone's advocating for that. Stephen has actually made not only good use of the position, but this is the position that every so often you see a reclass, class it up, class it down, class it up, because he brings in someone at the lower level, trains them, gets their experience, and then promotes them to the higher level. So you keep seeing the reclass of this position. It's been very effective for him. So, but that is an alternative to simply eliminate the position if you can't fund it out of REIT.
Anything else on this topic?
Nope, you needed to be aware of what was going on.
All right, let's go to the next topic.
All right, gonna hand it over to Nicole.
So the next topic is the Victim Advocate Fund. You do have that 10-year financial plan in your packet. When we're looking at this fund, we're looking at the revenues that are projected to decrease and how that's impacting the expenditures that are in that fund.
Where's the money come from?
So it comes from a number of places, grant revenue, federal and state, as well as penalty assessments. And that is where we're seeing a decrease in our revenues, is the assessment of penalties for crimes. They're anticipating that they may get some state grant funding that may bring that line item up. But even if they do get $250,000 in, which I'll share my screen, you'll see that's like the third row down under the revenue.
Able to make that bigger.
Yeah, let me try and make that bigger. That's good. So here you are in penalties. So they're forecasting this will be 250, but even with that, with the expenses that are built into this fund, which is mainly personnel, so 7 FTE, they're seeing that the fund will go negative. In this budget request, they're requesting to move 2 FTE into the general fund.
7 FTEs, you
There's
said?
currently 7 in there. They're looking to move 2 into the general fund to balance it.
So the request to move to victim advocates position to the general fund is included in this projection?
No, it is not.
So, and that's what will alleviate, can you
Want me to get into it?
explain the expenditures, the jumps from 326,000 in 23 to 490,000, almost 60,000?
Yeah. Are they asking for more FTE too as well in 24?
They are asking for some reclassifications in that fund. I don't think they're asking for additional FTEs though. Let me take a quick look.
Stop
Because
sharing.
that seems to be a significant expenditure increase.
It says, they're assuming 7 victim advocate positions are filled in 24, along with 1 a legal assistant position.
Get this huge jump in medical benefits.
And that's because we budget full benefits for the FTEs. So if
Are
they
they
had,
vacant? Are
we
these
can look into our
FTEs
vacancy report.
vacant?
When you request that, I'm just curious about the jump in revenue.
I will follow up with Heidi and find out if they're vacant.
Yeah, the projected
Yeah.
2023 to 2024.
Because
That's big.
if there's not justification behind that, you know, if it's an issue with a fund, you know, a flat revenue, a flat expenditures, obviously with a little bit of increase in cost of living, the fund should be okay.
Right. But if what's bringing the cost down in 22 and 23 are vacancies,
which I perceive there are
and
vacancies.
24 and 25 are fully funded FTEs, which is how we budget everywhere, then that would explain why it's up so high. And we wouldn't give him 2 unfunded FTEs. So the choice is, if that's the case, to either get the FTEs out of this fund to the general fund or eliminate the FTEs.
Because we'd have mid-range for those FTE if all 7 are filled, and then full benefits, so that's why you'd see the benefit line going up so high. And the 2 positions, they're asking for 174,000 in 24 and 180,000 in 25 to be moved to the general fund to help support the fund.
I'm curious why this federal grant funding went down significantly in 23.
And I'm following up with Heidi on that one. So they've had some issues with the grant funding because the legislature, Washington State Legislature identified more money for the states, but they identified a sum and only half of that was granted for, and they say it's a mistake and it's gonna be fixed, but they haven't seen that happen yet. So that's part of the revenue issue.
Yeah,
So we
that
can follow.
seems to be odd.
Right. Well, and it's not, this fund has been a problem fund for years. They're not gonna get grant money. They did get the grant money. They, they want more FTEs. They can't afford the FTEs. This is one of our, for a small fund, this is one of the more
Do
volatile
you remember if
funds.
the positions the board created back then on this fund was predicated on grant funding? If not, the position was
Yes,
eliminated?
with end dates.
And
And this was, I think you were already the county manager when the Board of County Commissioners had to remove end dates from the positions associated with this fund that were grant funded, because those positions were union positions, and with end dates, they were not accruing seniority, and that affected their standing when it came to layoffs. So, in the prosecutor's office, we're not able to attach end dates to union positions.
But can we attach provisos?
We could do provisos that if grant funding goes away, that the position's eliminated, like we do with other,
Yeah, I don't
we do
see.
that with similar positions. We're gonna get a lot farther when we fix our appropriation methods.
Right,
but-
and I wanna follow up, they are asking for an additional FTE in the crime victims program, they're asking for a victim advocate program coordinator.
In this fund, they're asking to get positions out of this fund and asking for a position to add to this fund?
or their request is move 2 current positions to the general fund and add a new position to this fund.
So they're doing a bunch of things because it's more, this is more of a reallocation because they want to add this one, but there's a vacant advocate position that they would eliminate if this position were created. So it's essentially a net zero, but they are asking for an adjustment in the type of FTEs that they have.
Well, based on the projections, it's not a net zero.
Can't afford it.
Yeah.
So, just, once again, we're bringing you right now the funds that have specific challenges so that you're aware of them, and this is one of them.
Nicole said something about $174,000. What is
Yeah.
that?
And for two positions, they're asking for in 24, 174 to move into the general fund, and 180, 2025 to move into the general fund for two FTE.
That seems to align on just about on the jump between 23 and 24.
So we can follow up and get more information to clarify the grant revenue and what's going on.
And Heidi just messaged me and said that they just received an email from the clerk's office and the state treasurer, and she's gonna forward that to me about, revenue. So she's sending me information and I can follow up.
Commissioner Edwards, any questions there? Mr. Mejia?
No, I'm, Vice Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Ken,
Okay, no questions, thank you.
okay.
So then
Alright.
we move on to the next fund. And that's LFO,
Pass the chair.
the Legal Financial
You
Obligations
want it?
Collections Fund.
Which one did you say?
LFO.
Oh, LFO, yeah, I got that.
So noted here, they're mentioning that in 2018, there was legislation that reduced the number of collection fees. So we're seeing a reduction in our revenues. Then in 2022, there was legislation that actually eliminated the new collection cost on criminal cases. So what they're seeing is just a decrease in their in their revenues. The issue here is that they're anticipating that this fund will come to an end because the revenue sources that are coming into it are drying up. However, there is a position in this fund. And so they've noted in their financial plan that that position's not gonna be filled, but we'll have to be able to submit that to you and have it dissolved, the position,
Whose position is this?
It's vacant.
the clerk.
Clerk's office.
Clerk's office, yeah. The position is vacant. The person who was in it was shifted to another position in 2022. They had no intention of filling this position because they knew that they didn't have the revenue to support it. The position is still on the books. It was an oversight that they didn't exclude it in their change request, so we've asked them to make that, change request, add that, to reduce that position.
Right. Otherwise, there would be budget in this fund and the fund would be in the red. So we need to just eliminate it.
Eliminate the position. Yes.
So, so the revenues eventually will dry out, but the projections keep somewhat steady until 2027. Is
It
it
should have
drying
been
out?
zeroed out.
They're not sure, so, they have the ability to collect on stuff before that certain point, so they don't know how long that's gonna last. They said that there's another, influx of revenue they get from another source, and they know that's gonna dry up, but they haven't heard when that's gonna happen yet. So I would probably assume that the revenue is gonna stay flat
For a
and
while.
decrease, but no new revenue will be coming in, no.
So,
That-
go ahead.
That leads me to my next question is, since this position could be eliminated by the board, then we ended up having an ending fund balance.
We need to just close the fund.
Right.
We
So-
need to close the fund and any
Be done, right?
residual
What are we-
revenue that
what are
comes
we
in is so
continue-
small.
what the county
put it
will
in the
continue
general
To have
fund.
revenues if they're
Right.
not expenditures, close the fund and,
Right.
right, okay.
That's what we really need to do.
Right, that's the conclusion that was leading, thank you.
Questions on this? Commissioner Edwards?
No, I don't have any questions on it, thank you.
Commissioner Mensah.
So if I remember right, there's several different pieces and, I mean, won't there still be money trickling in and then it'll just trickle into the general fund? That's okay to do?
Yes.
It's not restricted fund that has to be segregated out, even
I
though,
don't
even
think
though it's a
so.
tiny amount.
I don't think so. We'll check that before we close it out, but
Okay, well then I'm good.
yeah. So does this mean that the courts don't get to impose legal fines anymore?
It's going in that direction.
That's,
It's not 100%, but it's been,
I know it's been ratcheting down, but wow, so different. Yay. One more way that we use to finance the county's costs that we're not available to us any longer. I think that, you know, my personal opinion is this is a very good thing for the people involved in the justice system, but from a county finance perspective, this is one more source of revenue that is lost to us.
Yeah,
It's
trying.
not worth 500,000, so you can't get into the rainy day fund for it, but. All right,
So that was concluding our Wednesday's second half. So moving into Thursday's items, the first thing on the list is the lodging excise tax. So this was brought before us to look into, if the county, what the impact would be in assessing a second or a special lodging tax. So there's a one pager before you, looks like this. I'll share my screen so that you can have it. Some of those online.
mine's a two-pager.
It's 2 pages, supposed to be front and back. And when I printed, I was like, man, wasting trees here. So, yes, technically it's 2 pages. So just to overview really quickly, so the lodging tax is a hotel and motel tax that's charged on lodging, like hotels and motels, for short-term rentals that are within 30 days. So currently, we are collecting the basic or the state shared lodging tax, which is a 2% credit on the state sales tax. And we're receiving about 100,000 in 2022. And this, I guess, 2-pager is to speak about the special lodging tax, which is an additional 2% tax, sales tax. This would increase, the transaction, so the customer's sales tax rate here in the county. And the eligibility would be the same as the basic, or the state shared lodging tax. Again, would be assessed on any lodging accommodations less than 30 days. And it would be able to be used for tourism marketing, for operations and capital expenditures on tourism-related facilities, special events and festivals. And so I'm jumping down when I'm reading that to eligible uses. And there's 4 bullets there, so that's what I'm speaking to. So the special tax or the additional 2% can be used in the same manner that we're using the current tax. There would be no difference.
So questions?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this councilmanic action or this goes to the voters or,
It's by council,
so
so it doesn't have to go to the voters.
how many counties are imposing such a tax? Do we even have, I mean, well, another question I have is, do we tax it, would it tax the same activities like Airbnb I'm thinking of? Like, is Airbnb's currently taxed under the basic tax and it's the exact same
Exact same.
people that are included? It wouldn't be taxing any new
No,
enterprises.
that is correct.
It would just be increasing the tax on the existing enterprises that are taxed.
That is correct.
And without Airbnbs, we don't have much of that in the county.
that's true,
But with
unincorporated,
Airbnb, we do have some.
right.
If
There is an option to impose this on the city.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Sure, so, there's just like, the basic tax is a credit back on the state's share. The, special is also a credit back on the city's share. So if there are any cities within our county that are not imposing the special tax, we would get 2% in those areas as well.
However,
However, we did some research and Olympia and Lacey, I think even
in
in
Tumwater,
Tumwater, the major ones are already
they
collecting
already
it.
do it.
So you'd have the smaller areas.
So we really have no opportunity there.
Yes,
So the revenue, which is gonna be just unincorporated,
That's
which is gonna
what
be
we
the small.
propose.
that's what we're.
Same exact areas for the basic,
No, it's the-
unincorporated.
Robin said $100,000 is what we brought in last year. Is
Yes.
that, but this is slightly calculated different, or is it supposed to bring in another 100,000?
Another
So
100,000.
about the same.
Basically double what we get.
So the last page shows just how the revenues have come in with just the basic. And so we're anticipating it would just double.
Right. And you see, Nicole included a really nice little graph here, the history of the collections out of this particular fund. If you look back to 2008, you see that this tax used to collect next to nothing for Thurston County, and that's because we only had like 5 or 7 entities that were paying in. And it was in like right around 2019 when the state enacted an agreement with Airbnb to impose this tax on those rentals, that this tax took off for Thurston County. And we are now collecting more than we ever dreamed of.
Yes.
And so this, I know Commissioner Edwards serves on, the
LTAC.
law- Yeah, LTAC, and, I believe it was, Annette Pitts, from Experience Olympia and Beyond, really started looking into this, and she was the one who started doing all the research, and she did a lot of comparisons with different counties and like who has it, and so, you know, I think from their point of view, right, it's more revenue that could come in and go into, you know, either their agency or to events and that, you know, and just kind of take it up a level and promote it. So, I know that they were really advocating for this additional lodging tax.
Since this is an additional cosmetic sales tax, I will encourage the board to be mindful. You have a sales tax on the ballot this November. So you need to consider, be mindful as to how much taxation you may be considering this year.
But for this lodging tax, it's for people coming out that are coming in usually, right? I mean, it's,
Consider the headlines.
Yep, it is just to be mindful on, because it's gonna be a cosmetic action to add an additional sales tax.
Commissioner Edwards, I want to hear what you have to say.
I think the county manager's on point.
For now,
For now, I mean, it's
Yeah.
the timing, it's the,
you know,
I've
not
had a good
never.
discussion with Annette, and there's nobody that she's aware of that is not collecting this.
Two counties, one of which is ours, apparently.
Oh, well, yes, but no,
Yeah.
around here locally, I guess that's what I'm told.
True, the cities, the major cities do impose
to
it.
clarify my statement, I'm not saying for you not to consider, for you to consider the timing
Right.
of it.
so 2 counties are not collecting.
Who's the other?
We're one of them.
And we're one of them.
Let the other
So
one
that
Kitsap
means-
County.
Oh, it's not collected.
So Commissioner, that means this. Just so there's no doubt. Okay.
Probably Wacayacum, where there are no hotels.
Right. The money would have to go through the LTAC.
Listening to you.
it would not necessarily go to the VCB. It would be
Right.
double the LTAC money that the committee has to hand
The
out.
VCB could benefit.
Sure.
would
they
absolutely
yes, they
benefit,
would benefit.
And it would tourism uses, so it would be a
Yep,
good thing in that respect,
it's got merit.
right? And the LCB would be free to apply for a grant from the LTAC.
The other county is Adams County,
Adams County.
Hmm.
Franklin County.
That makes sense too.
Oh, more than one,
Yep, Adams and Franklin.
Oh, so we're one of three.
one of three.
Franklin
not
makes sense too. Yeah. Even Wacaicum has
Adams and Franklin are like northwest,
No, southeast.
southeast. I'm sorry, I meant northeast, southeast. Okay.
Yeah, Franklin County, Franklin,
Southeast.
Benton,
Oh, okay.
yeah, Richland.
Okay, and Adams is Othello.
I can't remember what's in Adams County,
It's over east of the mountains.
yes.
I feel like I
Right.
should know my counties
So-
better than.
There's the
So-
information.
Thank you for that, and just something for commissioners to have in mind.
Exactly. We will include this as we have every year on your revenue options in January.
We're gonna jump into a big conversation. Should we just go ahead or?
Yeah, let's leap in.
Okay, so the next item is the balancing general fund budget conversation. So what the budget team did was a brain dump. We looked at, past brainstorming options as far as balancing the general fund, what has been proposed or thought of in the past. And then also, at our current situation, looked at options that may be available. So the document I'm referring to is called Draft Budget Containment Options.
I remember this document.
Yes, I was thinking two of you might recall this document. So
Bad
again,
memories.
yeah, this is the brain dump of ways to contain spending, if you will. And we put this up so that you could see a comprehensive list of ideas. But we would suggest to you that there are very few things on this list that are viable or would get you sufficient savings to close the gap that we're talking about, which is in the $7 million range. So, I mean, just look at the first bullet, do not grant COLAs, it's not like you're gonna do that. So there are so many things on this list that are just not viable, but we did wanna share the whole list with you. So setting that aside, where's the short list?
Yep, I'll share that next. So the short list, it says 2024 biennium policy request proposed short list.
Oh, these are the must-dos.
These are the most used, that's what we have. is
Where's
short
the
list.
short list of things we think they actually could do in that?
No, we
Did we not, we
Nope.
didn't print that up?
We didn't put that together.
Okay,
That
so,
was supposed to be behind, they were gonna ask questions and we were gonna give them
Okay.
notes.
we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about this long list. We haven't done a lot of work to calculate how much each one would save, because that's really, not a worthwhile exercise. Quite frankly, we have the calculations that were done in early 2020. If you'd like to know approximately how much they'd save, and we have that list handy so we could answer questions about them. So if there's any item on this list, we'd be happy to answer. But we do have a short list that we're prepared to talk about of things that could actually save money.
Questions on this list, because I already have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
So,
You didn't, you didn't go through this exercise with us last time. Please ask.
So for the short list, or not the budget.
I went
committee.
through the,
These are the must-dos,
these,
yeah.
but for the must-dos, are we looking at that or are we just looking through this?
We can.
We can shift to this. The other item in your packet
Yep.
is these are the policy items. When we look through that whole list of policy items, all of the $16 billion, this is the list of things that we think are must-dos. So, and some of them you have options. You don't simply have to fund them out of the general
Do you
fund.
have that, is that gonna be up on the screen?
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now.
She's gonna share it. So the first one is all about one of the funds that we just talked about, getting 2 of the victim advocate positions out of the victim advocate fund. We do obviously need to do a little more work to scrub the numbers in the financial plan, but if we, your option, of course, is to simply eliminate the 2 positions. But the request that came in was to shift them out, and you have to do something to balance the victim advocate fund. The second item is funding the contract increase for food services. What you'll hear from the sheriff's office is that their contract is increasing along with the number of inmates going up. And what we hadn't heard about during the pandemic, apparently, is the cost of the contract went up. And they were able to absorb it because the number of inmates went down. Well, now with the inmates coming back, the contract's going up and they need additional funding.
Why is that a policy question?
Because
Isn't that maintenance level?
it's not a maintenance level, it's a contract increase. And the cost went up because of the meals for the staff.
The staff meals went up, so they had, the contract for the corrections officers includes, staff meals. And so the price of the staff meals went up significantly, and that was the part that was absorbed because there weren't the inmates. And so now that, like Robin was saying, now that they're increasing the number of people in the jail, the food, they need additional money to cover food.
So we think that this needs to be funded, but it's a contract increase. The third item on the list is the detention sales tax expenditures. The budget includes a shift of 500,000 in '24, $1 million in '25. We talked about this fund yesterday. There may be options on what to shift it to. We did hear back last night from Heidi Thompson. The amount of contract bed funding left in the corrections budget is not 400,000, it's 68,000. 400,000 is how much we stripped out toward the
68.
medical contract. So there's not a lot there, but we'll bring other options forward, but we have to do something to balance the detention sales tax fund. The next item is increased autopsy, indigent, and extra help budget. The coroner bundled the items that he needs to get to, oh no, because there's 2 FTEs also, the next 2 items. All 3 of these together are what we believe are the needs of the coroner to get him to accreditation and address his current costs.
And what's the downside if he doesn't get accredited?
We lose revenue from the state of Washington. They
And
stop paying
are
their
we
share of
getting that?
autopsies.
Are we getting that now or not?
Yes, we do get it now.
Then what are there's
How much revenue are we bringing in from autopsies? The
think it's
state pays for
40%.
at least half,
So
and I
it-
think a little more.
is that new legislation?
No, that's been in existence for some time.
Well, I guess I'm curious what changes.
The-
You said if he doesn't get
Right,
accredited.
so you may recall that not last year, but the year before, the coroner came forward with requests for the additional things to get his office accredited. I believe they have until a certain date to do so, and that date is coming up pretty fast.
Twenty
That's through
twenty-five.
RCW.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Is
we,
that an unfunded mandate cost? wouldn't it
I don't think it is an unfunded mandate because of the way they pay for part of the cost of autopsies.
Yeah, but if they don't pay after a certain date,
If we're not accredited, they'll stop paying.
I know, but then would that be,
No, that would not be an unfunded mandate. That would be us not meeting the letter of the law.
well, 'cause we
To
can-
get him
because
accredited.
the state doesn't give us enough money to meet the letter of the law.
Well, that's the penalty aspect of this particular state law.
Okay, then my next question, my follow-up, is, so we don't do autopsies. We didn't do autopsies for lots of years and we still put bad guys in jail, solved murders, did the whole thing. Boy, it was very seldom we did an autopsy.
That is certainly a discussion that you could have with the coroner when he does his presentation. Because I do believe that the law requires a certain autopsies on certain types of cases. And we have talked to the coroner and he performs the minimum required under state law. So do
Well, then
none
it-
is
then
a
it becomes an
conversation you
unfunded
could have
mandate,
with
right?
him.
So that's the dilemma. It's the chicken or
What
the
if we're
egg.
not doing what we're told? Then
And-
it becomes us.
yeah, if you remember, the coroner brought this back in
think it's
2021.
2 years ago. I think so.
When was my first year?
That would have been
2021. It's felt longer than that. So 2021, the coroner brought this up because of that new legislation. And I think we granted one of the autopsy techs, but we were like, we'll wait in the chief deputy coroner because then we kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit. And said, okay, we'll have this consideration once the biennium comes up. Since that position doesn't have to really be filled till later on. So I guess this is, I've had this in the back of my mind since, and I knew it was gonna kind of come back and bite us in the butt, and so here we kind of are, and the loss of revenue, we had conversations at that time about like, is it an unfunded mandate? But since the state is giving us that revenue and basically their approach is the stick rather than the carrot, this is their penalty. And if we don't comply with this, they'll give us the stick and they'll take that funding away. So it's caught in a hard place.
Question on the increased autopsy indigent, is the request, obviously for every autopsy, we receive 40%, is not a funding source, is based on the actual autopsies we
Based on the
conduct.
number done, yeah.
So in this case, is the 420,000 additional, in addition to the current autopsy budget that we have?
Yes,
How that relates to the forensic, because I believe that position is gonna alleviate having to contract out autopsies.
that is an excellent question to ask the coroner when he's here. We have not,
They have not had luck finding a candidate to fill that position.
understand,
I thought somebody was
did
coming from
find a
somewhere.
great
I
candidate.
think he
but-
was in the process of finalizing, but I don't wanna get into that point, but still, that position the board created to alleviate having to go out and pay for autopsies. So how that relates, if the board would approve that position by 250,000 salary base plus benefits, and an additional 400,000 for autopsies from the baseline, doesn't seem to align.
So this isn't only new autopsies. Part of this funding is to pay the increased cost of indigent burials. There's also increased cost of extra help because his for a 24/7 operation, he is minimally staffed. And if people are out sick or if he has vacancies, he is dependent, or someone just wants to take a day off, he is dependent on extra help and overtime. So part of this is tied to that. We'd have to unpack what exactly all those things are, but it does, what you're getting at, totally valid question, is dependent on him filling that position. And we don't know that he's actually
Still,
done
he will
so.
have salary savings if he doesn't fill that position by,
That's true, he is having,
so it's,
yep,
so it's, you know, it's not all that balance, right?
it is all balance. So, we believe that these three items are things that you must consider. There may be as always, conversation to be had, but as far as just what the staff have done is identify the requests that come in that we have to address in some fashion.
So with the forensic autopsy tech, that position, we funded an autopsy tech already. Does the RCW state that we have to have two?
That is one of the ones that we were kind of on the fence about. We're not quite
So
sure.
when I talked to Gary, the coroner, about this, he did say that they have one currently, and that person assists on all of the autopsies. Every single autopsy that person is involved in. So this part of this position is so that person isn't doing all of the work.
So this is more of a,
This might
not
be
saying
a-
that it's not a
Need,
need, but it's
yeah.
more of a want.
It
to
might be
assist.
on that end of the scale, yeah.
Rather than like, we really need to do this because if not, the legislator is gonna take the funding away kind of conversation.
That's a good point. What is the true baseline? Right, to get what he wants to be in terms of the certification.
And not saying that he does not need this position at all, like I'm sure that the need is absolutely there, but where we're at right now, it's like,
This might be a one.
is it legislatively mandated where we have to do it?
So he has indicated that legislation in 2025 also increases the number of deaths that they have to do autopsies on. So they have to do
Goes the other
OD,
direction.
they will have to do ODs, traumatic deaths such as falls, delayed traffic deaths, suicides, and for patients who are in hospitals less than 24 hours. So the state is increasing their autopsy requirements as well,
So then it's an unfunded mandate.
to your point.
They'll pay half of all those new autopsies.
If we're accredited.
Yeah.
You know,
As long as
there's
we're
lots of
accredited.
legislation on the books that doesn't get followed. And, it's just the way it is. I mean,
So I absolutely agree with that, and that's part of the conversation that I think we need to have later this morning, is there are lots of things in state laws that have absolutely no, well, I wouldn't say no consequence, but if the county doesn't do them, we don't lose funding, there are not penalties. So later this morning, we will have that very conversation. Going down,
I've just got one quick question, maybe you guys might know the answer to that, so I'll quit thinking about it. The officers, the cameras in the car, body cams, I guess they're called. Did that come with the criteria that specified that we had to do that for 5 years or 10 years or 1 year? When we got that grant mainly is what I'm wondering about.
the grant to buy them was one-time money,
Yeah,
yeah.
He's asking, did that obligate us to keep them
Keep
for
them
some
forever?
period of time?
that's what I'm.
Use them to purchase?
The strings on the money were very strange and not necessarily tied to, it was weird money. It was a very weird, I'm sorry,
It wasn't
seen a lot of
specific-
different
It wasn't
funding.
specific for body cams. I think the board made that decision.
No, it was
Right,
criminal,
it
it was
was
implemented, it
related,
was-
anything related to the law and justice legislation that had
legislation
passed in
and
2 years.
adapting, and the sheriff came and said this was his top priority to get
That's
the body
right.
cam, so.
And that's how you used it.
Right.
So, no, there wasn't necessarily a requirement that we have the body cameras for X amount of time that came with the money. We'd have to look at the state laws.
I don't think it's
I
mandated.
don't think
in
that they
state
even
law.
require body cameras.
Not
No,
yet.
not everyone's implemented
No,
it.
but everyone's doing it.
Well, they're trying,
everyone.
but when they find out the stuff that we've found out about how the additional costs are thrown in there that you can't keep up with.
It is, I mean, partly we have a contract for the body cams right now. We'd have to look at the
Yeah, I mean,
contract to know the.
is there
what
a
are the
get out of jail
clauses.
clause or something there?
The other thing too that I've just heard anecdotally, and I don't know what the sheriff has heard, but in terms of recruitment, more and more, like younger deputies, there's an expectation that that's a tool that they have, just, for themselves to document what's occurring as a safety.
After that thing in Seattle, maybe they'll have second thoughts on that.
Oh, it
It's
was
a
just-
stupid thing. I mean, I'll explain it later. I don't wanna explain it on camera.
Contract, like if I remember right though, this equipment, excuse me, sneeze. This equipment has like a pretty, doesn't last as long as you
Shelf
might
life,
hope that
yeah.
it would,
Mhm.
which would potentially give us, if we had to cut that cost,
Something.
I think it's like 3 year, I mean, it's like 3 or 4 years or.
Did we did replacement of the body cams to the URNR? Probably not, huh?
So, did we, or is the funding one of what is the request that's not on this short list from the sheriff to add things to ER&R?
Oh, no, that is equipment that was damaged and they wanna replace.
Oh, that was
I'm-
that was the drones and okay, cause there was an item on the policy request from the sheriff to add a significant amount of equipment to,
The
well,
URNR.
money, to support equipment to ER&R, but I
I'm-
think that the body cams are
I'm checking with Amy.
already in. All right.
They should be, 'cause they were
So
purchased in
moving
22.
on,
was
the
there.
next
So
two
they should
items
be
on the
already included.
list are the public information specialists, the 2 FTEs in this office. And we are suggesting that that is a must-do, because if you don't do those, then you need to extend the contract with TC Media, which costs more than the 2 FTEs.
Okay,
And
I do have a question.
That's a net positive action.
Yes.
I'm not saying it isn't a good thing, but you say we must do. I need to hear more about, we're talking about cutting, what, 80 employees or something? So,
Yes, and internally, we had the conversation about putting 2 FTEs for our own office on the must-do list. But again, if you look at the reduction in the cost of the TC Media contract is $330,000. And the cost of these 2 FTEs to continue the work that needs to be done to broadcast the activities of the board and the whole county is only $245,000. It is a net savings.
How
You
much
have
does-
to do one or the
how
other.
much does Public Works or the Road Department or the Health Department put in on that?
These positions will be distributed on the 60-40 split, just like
But maybe
all
we can
other
assign
positions.
more details to the Health Department and Road Department, so we can
and-
get more than,
and-
maybe 80-20.
Yeah, you could get there, you could. You'd have to broadcast the meeting. You got the trick chair today.
Just gotta watch where you put your feet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And the two, well, I mean, and with 1 FTE, they would not be able to broadcast the meetings.
There would be,
So the, is a couple two-prong on that. We need to fully staff the control room. they transmit all your meetings. And I believe there is a need also, additional need when the 5 commissioners are coming. And this is just increased work. You know, is a net positive in this particular case, and that was the strategy as to why we put this forth.
The other one was for creative content. I believe that's what the request says, to be able to develop the content that you would get through TC Media where they develop it.
I have to say, I think those are nice to do things. I'm not sure they're mandated things to do. I just if we think about all the other positions that we
Yeah,
have
I don't know
to
that we can
review.
afford the extra creative content.
That's,
And I wanna make sure we can broadcast our meetings and create public,
And that's,
access to our business,
that's
but.
part of your conversation.
Yep.
I think, for me, as I see it, right, completely understanding the situation we're in, I'm just seeing it as, we're getting this from like the PEG fees, right?
oh,
Just
this is
capital.
general fund.
This is general fund only.
The PEG fees are,
Capital.
For cameras and.
Okay.
equipment.
Equipment.
Okay.
Can we not maintain that equipment with PEG fees?
We do maintain the equipment with the PEG fees.
Why isn't part of this funding for staff to help maintain the equipment?
this is
No,
not
no,
capital.
Can't use it for M&O. It's gotta be used for capital.
No, okay. Can't stretch it.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
But more to come when
Well-
you discuss this.
Oh,
Robin.
Wouldn't be a lot of money. I mean, think about that. We can't pay for staff with it. That type of M&O can't be for staff.
But how do we fix something when it breaks?
That's, we do that out of the PEG fee because the fix, is the cost of the project.
We have
to,
that staff
to
person
do
fix it.
whatever. But if there's staff costs involved in the project, but that's not what these people are doing.
I know.
But we could pay a little bit of our rent because that's part of how TC Media was using the money.
Oh,
They
yeah.
justified the payment of rent for their facility.
And that was a little bit of a difference of opinion.
It's a stretch.
Difference of opinion between attorneys, but
But it got cleared and Ken said yes, and, so if we paid the cost of the rental space for this room, it's, like I said, it wouldn't be a lot, it'd probably calculate out to like $2,000 a month, it's not a lot, but I could certainly look at that. It's not enough to fill this gap, but it's, something to look at. Anyway, those 2 items, again, we were just identifying requests straight off the policy list. And those 2 go together, and it costs less to have in-house staff than it does to have the TC Media contract.
I mean, we might have to cut back what we do, what we offer as far as to the public. I don't
live
know.
streaming.
Yeah, I don't know I mean, we gotta do something.
Seriously?
We're in a pickle.
I mean, the live streaming though is like one of the main components of like open government, right?
Oh,
I
yeah,
like,
I'm- I want live streaming worse than most, but I'm just saying, we're up against a hard spot here. That's all. Just-
All right,
I wouldn't wanna take away.
How about we
that,
just
though,
set up
to
a
the-
camera here with YouTube and broadcast it? I don't know, I
doesn't-
really
doesn't
don't
work-
know
doesn't
what it
work like
takes,
that.
Well,
but,
that's what you need somebody who can manage that for you.
well, we'll just turn it on when we come in the room.
Who's? Just
we
I don't know, I don't have the answer, I'm just trying to come up with
need
it.
someone to run the control room. At least that one, someone. Moving on to the next item. Development services, this is, what we talked about when we talked about the land use and permit fund. You'll hear more about it on September 25th. when you see the fee study, and then again during the presentation on the budget, during the presentation weeks. But this is the allocation, $3 million in '24. 1.7 of that is a one-time to address the fund balance in the fund. And then it also includes, and you see in '25, the ongoing 1.4 million for recoverable from fees.
If we could get enough permits issued from now until then, we'll have the money to cover that.
It still can't cover the cost of the non-recoverable activities.
All boils down to color of money.
The next item on the list, we believe is a must-do, and it really should have been in maintenance level, is the Emergency Services Director's salary reallocation of approximately $30,000. The director's position had been funded 100% out of the Medic One Fund. Their time is not spent 100% on Medic One. It is really divided and going with the state law that says one fund cannot benefit another. We need to allocate the salary appropriately.
Who beats us up if we don't?
State auditor.
Is it, yeah, but is it one of those things that really affects us?
It's one of those things where they'll come and say you need to allocate your cost appropriately and tell us to shift
We're
the
obligated
funds.
to make
It
those.
will be a noted finding.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got to do it. The next item is a net zero cost, but it's something we have to do. The sheriff and our IT director have agreed to take the IT positions out of the sheriff's office and make it an embedded position in IT. So it nets to zero, and it's something we have to do. And then the last item on the list is you have to do this if you follow through with the directive you've given us to cover the internal service costs for the lake management districts in the transfer to CPED out of Public Works. Those costs increase by 27,000 a year. So we need to fund that.
It wouldn't, the recommendation, if it were to switch to a department, would be environmental health versus CPED.
Oh, health, yes, thank you, not CPED.
But
My
the
misspoke.
proposal that will be coming to the board on the 25th is for something.
Yes, we have an alternative to this, but again, we were picking the items off the list. If in current state, you'd have to do this.
So more to come.
More to come on this. So it's a grand total of must-dos. I had been guessing in the $3 million range yesterday. If we did these things as proposed, it would be 4.8 million in '24 and 3.6 million in '25.
So I have a question in regards to the development service, the general allocation, and why it's so much in 2024 of 3.1 million. When we were discussing that 1.8, what?
It's a combo in the first year.
I understand it, but it's different than what, I understand what you described that it is, where it's 1.7 is just shoring it back up, like we shored it back up last year, but then there's an ongoing 1.4 that we're gonna have to budget. I didn't know that was gonna be doubled up in this year.
That's, yeah.
I thought it was 1.7 and then 1.4.
And is there a way to kind of break that cost over the years instead?
So yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I have to agree with Commissioner Mejia. This is not how it was described. It was
So
supposed
if
to be
you look at this
1.7
fund-
short us back, and then we'd have to think about 1.4 in ongoing years. We're now
Well,
told 3.1.
We could put the 1.7 this year, but it's gotta come out of some year, and if you look at this financial plan, which actually at this point in time, the revenue and expenditures are reasonable. you see that we're in the hole at the end of '23 by about $6,000. So we've gotta put money in this year, maybe not 1.7 million, but you've got to address this ending fund balance, and then that's really what the costs are.
That's a good question though, and I thank you for asking that question because on 2024 is a 3.1 million.
They have loaded the entire cost into next year.
So in this, if we go by this scenario, I mean, the board could take an action to make this fund whole, so it doesn't go into red, 100,000, I'm just using that number. And then injecting the 1.8 for the rest, it appears they might solve the issue, but I don't understand the 3.1, so that's.
You would have, you'd have no buffer in the ending fund balance, and then you also have the cost allocation issue that you're using, you can't be using the fees to cover current non-recoverable
I
costs.
understand that, but I'm just looking at, I think that's the commissioners are.
I
looking
think
at
that,
this.
so what I think I understand Robin is explaining is the so it could be alternatively a $1.7 million budget amendment at the end of this year and then the 1.4 next year. But instead of that, they're just shoving the 1.7 that we'd have to shore up this year into next year. But my question then is, we backfilled 900,000 last year. How did we double the shortfall in 1 year? Like 900,000 was the total cumulative land use fund deficit last year. We funded it. Now we've accumulated another 1.7 million in just 1 year. How did that magnitude occur?
Isn't it addressing the recoverables and the non-recoverables?
I'm sorry?
The recoverable activity and the non-recoverable activity.
They were just being more
Yeah.
diligent about not charging. So there was 900,000 even when we were charging non-recoverable.
They put $1 million
They
in
put
this
$1
year
million in.
already.
And then when we take non-recoverable, it grows to, it balloons to
So-
1.7.
so-
Those great
there-
questions, and I think they're listening, a briefing is coming up.
Yes,
Right,
on the
on the
25th.
25th.
So I think that will be a great opportunity to, you know, get a little more granular on this.
Yeah, because I'm just confused on how we get to that 3.1. I'm just trying to figure it out in my head and it's just,
Well, just think that 2024, the number you're seeing for 2024 is our subsidy for that year, and then all the 2023 shortfall. It's like basically 2 years worth.
I think it's addressing two things. It's sort of the fund balance question, which is really addressing the cash flow piece to make sure that you have what you need to cover those non-recoverable expenses that are general fund backed. So it's making sure that you have that cash flow, plus acknowledging that there is this ongoing level of work that is non-recoverable, which is that 1.7. Historically, we have been already funding at the 300,000 mark, so that's why you see in 2025 the 1.4, because it's saying we already have, status quo is the 300,000.
Right, you will see on this financial plan that this year the board contributed not only the regular 300,000, but an additional million. So this year they put in 1.3 million, which should have covered those costs. What it doesn't do is create the reserve in the fund balance to address cash flow needs and future expenses. Now, it is totally within your purview to tell them, well, you don't get to have a fund balance of $1.5 million. You can tell them that the fund balance is gonna be less for a while. But to get it to where it really ought to be is gonna take an additional 1.7.
So
And it
that-
could be, it could be split over the biennium.
Could
too.
be.
I mean, the effect is the same.
the 1.7. So is that to like kind of set a reserve?
It's
Or
to
it's
address
just- or it's
cash
just to-
flow and reserve, because right now they don't have either.
Well, can part of that reserve, can it be shifted from the rainy day fund, like from one reserve to the other, to kind of have that coverage, right, of, I don't know how much, out of that
So-
1.7, and then, at least for us, then we would just be covering, you know, the 1.4 ongoing, and then maybe the, you know, the cash flow needs. But for reserve, I'm not sure if that's,
So the rainy day fund can be used for when you see a significant drop in revenue.
We're
We don't
seeing
have that.
if we don't do inject this, then they're gonna see a significant.
We don't have a significant drop in revenue?
No, their growth rate is not robust,
I'm
but
talking about
it's still
total.
growing.
Total revenue.
So there's not that. There's not been a negative action by the legislature, an adverse action. And the third item is specifically about the general fund
Yeah.
But there
dropping below
has
10
been an
million.
adverse action by the legislature. Now we have a 90-day period to complete things, and we need to be able to be set up enough and have enough cash flow in order for us to be processing these permits in a
Right,
manageable time.
but that's not unfunded because you can, if
Charge
they
permit
are
fees for
working
those.
on permits, we should be charging fees.
Are we talking about the verbiage in our own resolution?
No.
Passed?
Oh,
Yes.
that it's limiting you from taking money out of the rainy day fund. Yes, we are.
So
That
why
is the
can't we
resolution
adjust
in
that?
place. You have the prerogative
Thank you,
of
because you
changing
have the
the
latitude to
resolution.
change that.
Yeah,
I'm just,
so
Certainly
we could
could.
make it fit.
you know, I'm seeing this 3.1, if it's to go from one reserve to another reserve, right? I would be willing to do that because it's just to kind of,
It's not really a reserve though, it's
Well,
just
it
a
is-
fund balance.
well, it's for.
And that's true of every single 100 funds we have. They've all got a fund balance. I don't consider that an emergency reserve, the way the rainy day fund operates.
I
So,
don't see
more
how
to
we can,
come.
yeah, I don't see how we can afford the 3.1 million, there's just no.
Don't establish that much of a fund balance in this fund.
Robin, really key on the potential options is really do you really want to put it in the reserve of the, is how much is the ending fund balance you're going to accept? Is it 1.7, 500, 200? It's just, really, that gives you the latitude.
Bring this
And
financial.
I think the reserve is, if you look at the 10-year financial plan, cash
Sharing.
flow
Oh.
needs were for 3 months was 1.2. So if from a cash flow
What would
perspective,
happen
you
if
look at
in
reducing
22 you started
what's
to add,
available, then
Because
1.4 million
what this
just,
fund does is
That's a
they
PDF, I gotta open
get
it, 'cause I let it
revenue
put numbers
Yeah.
in. I gotta find the page.
every day.
So Nicole
Sales
and I
tax.
are over here going, what happens? What if? So she's gonna open the Excel file and maybe we do share it. Take a minute to pull it up. And we're gonna lay in, what if we only added 250,000 this year and then added the 1.4 million in ongoing years?
Thank you.
Want me to share this?
Sure. So in 2023, increase that million to 125 or add 250,000. And now in every year after that on that same row,
Want the same amount?
yeah, just 1,000,000,
400.
1.4, yeah.
You want the
1.4.
1.4?
What are they asking for? 147?
It's 1414 or something.
1414. Not
1424.
does that
424.
take into account the,
4,200?
You just put
300
420,000.
I know, I'm like, what are they
That's
doing?
420,000.
And 32 cents.
That's
There you
right.
go.
Okay, thank
Made
you.
that. And now, yeah, and now what does the fund balance look like? So,
Sold.
it's not robust by any
I
means.
mean, that's what I said, sold.
The question is, will it meet cash flow needs? Probably.
A little bit different, as I was telling this Rob, is because the revenue is coming in.
It is definitely different than what the department is asking for or the fee study says they need, but it gives them a fund balance and keeps them in the black. So you could definitely do that, and we could bring
And-
that
and
$3
at
million
least-
down.
and at least, you know, go through the next biennium and start reassessing how that
Yeah,
evolves. But I think it's giving you an option here.
yep.
Thank you for bringing that up.
So then-
The model,
What is this just instead of the 3.1 to do
1.48.
1.4?
Back up.
Yeah. Yes, well,
250,000 though, you said.
Well,
250,000
today.
this year.
This year,
Yeah,
So it'd
this
be
year
250.
is 250.
And
This,
then-
so the proposal here in 2024 will be
And no, leave
reduced
that
to
one to-
1.4, 3.1.
They wanted 1.7 and through 1.4.
yes.
And we're saying 250,000 and 1.4, so that's
Yes.
1.65.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
here.
but we'd put the 200, yes, basically, yes.
cumulatively.
So the 3.1 goes to 1.65
That's what I have
for
here,
the,
right?
For next year, no,
Well,
the way they've structured
We'd
it.
split it between the years, but it's gonna have the same
but I think
effect
what,
on the
same
fund
effect, because
balance.
what he's saying is, if you add the $250,000 a year, the ending fund balance for 2023 will be $250,000 less.
the question I have though is the 1.4, is that inclusive of the 300 that already is
No,
programmed?
it's on top of,
Okay.
And the
yeah,
300
because what they've said is that they need
Mhm.
1.7 every year.
And the 300,000 is a direct appropriation, it's not a transfer into the fund.
It's already in their base.
This just gives you options when you get to that point.
Don't hear that.
Good call. Slash that
I
down.
was just like,
Right. Okay, so those are the things that we think you really need to do. And that brings it pretty close to what I was estimating yesterday, that the reduction exercise needs to be around $7.5 million to keep the fund in balance in the future. So ways to get there are very few ways to get that much money in ongoing savings. And the first and the most typical, if you will, that's not wonderful, is across the board reductions. You see in front of you how much we would get in just a flat percentage that excludes 24/7.
Correct.
So excluded is the coroner, we've excluded emergency
They
services.
don't have a general fund appropriation.
Emergency management
does.
does, that's right, thank you.
It's corner and sheriff.
Right, the coroner and the sheriff are basically, coroner, law enforcement, and corrections are the ones that we excluded. We thought about juvenile court. We may need to exclude a portion of that for the juvenile jail, but
Georgia just messaged me, juvenile is 24/7.
Yep. So we'll have to parse that out too, but this gives you approximately how much we could save. At 2.5% across the board reduction excluding 24/7, you'd get just under $2 million. To get to the 7.5 million, we're looking all the way up to somewhere around a 10% budget reduction in offices and departments. And this worksheet, we showed you what that impact is on both general fund and other funds. You don't need to apply it to other funds, but one of your considerations is if you're doing it to this group, do you do it to all groups? we'd save 7.8 million a year on a flat 10% across the board. And what we were talking about yesterday is if at this level, if the intention is to have real reductions that will last instead of temporary reductions, what we're really talking about is cutting FTEs. So,
Identify positions as we go along and scratch that position number out and it goes away forever.
yes, that's exactly what you'd be doing, and I would recommend that you would ask any office or department to give you a list of the
Identify
positions that
those,
they would
so.
select, that the board would not select them.
But
But
the cumulative amount of whatever they select equals 9%.
X-
Say we said 9%, it
well,
would be 9%
you,
of their budget.
you've got dollar targets. Give us enough in FTE elimination. So for example, the commissioner's office would need to save 341,000 at an average of 100,000 per FTE roughly. That's a little over 3 positions. We'd have to come up with probably 3 positions that we would lose in the commissioner's office.
And I guess as we refer to that, when we talk about positions, whether maybe it's a position that's currently not filled. would be
Correct.
one thing.
Ideally,
Or if it's a position that we eliminate, there's how many positions open throughout the county? Almost another 100 positions are open throughout the county that possibly that person would be able to fit into.
right, that's right. We would absolutely work if any person in a position was affected to place them elsewhere. Commissioner Mejia.
Could we do retirement incentives?
They cost at first, so yes, you could
I mean, even if
possibly.
it's with healthcare benefits, right? I know that usually, people don't wanna retire, it's usually because of, you know, they wanna keep their
Because you
healthcare.
need to maintain
So-
the medical for a
Yeah,
certain
so
amount of
I'm
time.
just wondering if we expand that healthcare benefit to maybe like a year after you decide, but
Under
is-
Cobra,
yeah, is there a possibility to provide those incentives, right? And see if
Sure.
there's kind of a shift there
you
and then,
also lose service credits.
It'd be about
Which
$15,000
contributes to your
per
retirement pay.
employee per year.
How much?
15,000 per employee per year.
For the medical.
Well,
but
that
it's,
wouldn't
I mean,
cover
the
the medical
impact is, you
payment.
know,
That'd
it's-
help to offset it.
It'd be rough, I mean, for one.
But
one
I
person.
mean,
I
I
think
feel
this is
like,
something that I've recently been looking at, so. I
so
know
I'm just
exactly.
wondering if there's like that possibility to offer those retirement incentives, right? And I mean, we're seeing
Absolutely, there
we're seeing that
absolutely is.
shift already in workforce, and if there was a little bit to, you know, kind of, I don't know, not shift that work, but you know, if people are already considering retiring and those are gonna happen, right? I think it would be easier to kind of shift things around and
So it.
it
there-
wouldn't cover the gap, I know that,
Exactly.
but it would help to cover.
So are you suggesting that for, you know, if someone accepted early retirement, that that's the position you would eliminate?
Well, at that point, right, I feel like the office
would
or
be vacant.
department would have to kind of shift things around with their
Right,
own and
And they'd
eliminate
end
a
up with a
position.
vacancy.
Yeah, it would just create a vacancy for
Yeah.
an
they
office or
can move
department
things
to
around.
shift things around and
You
eliminate.
certainly could do that. We could come up with a plan, we would work with Maria and come up with some type of early retirement incentive. I will tell you that in the 2 or 3 times that I was involved in that type of thing in the state of Washington, what we found every time is it cost more than it saved. So
It
I
would
don't
just-
know, we'd
yeah.
have to look at it, but we could certainly look at it.
With incentives, and I think it's, the predictability of the action, it becomes a little bit of a question.
Right, because if it's voluntary,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah, it'd have to
guarantee.
be.
we'll have a
I mean, I mean, it is good,
Yep.
a good option, a policy that you can implement, but the predictability of that will result in eliminated positions to address the hole here. It may not be there. That's probably the only risk on
Well,
that.
you know, I know like in seeing some of the departments, right? I know that people are aiming towards, they're very close to that
Yep.
path, right? And so I'm just wondering if there's that possibility to kind of be like, if you do it now, right, there's going to be this incentive, whether it's healthcare coverage or whatever it is. You know, I think it would also allow that department or office to kind of shift things around instead of kind of waiting it out and then just like being able to be like, okay, since this person's going to be retiring, I can strike this position off, and this is the position that we will not be, you know, this is the position that we're going to be kind of scratching off our
Right.
our books, and therefore, I mean, long-term, it's kind of creating that savings because the position's going to cease to exist.
Right. If those were the positions that one would strike, it's much more likely that the people that retire are gonna be in positions that
In
you
a
wanna
senior
retain.
management, right?
And
But
you'd
then
be
that
moving someone up, and what you'd actually reduce
is
is
the,
a
that,
lower level
but that it
position.
still would,
But there's savings there.
yeah, but it would still
That would
create that
offset
saving.
somewhat.
But you lose a lot of institutional knowledge.
You
People are
do,
thinking,
but we're gonna lose them anyway.
I
when they
mean, these are
retire.
people that are already thinking of retiring. It's not like
We lose
they're.
him right now, I mean, in a year, we'll lose him right now. I think that's
Yeah.
That's kind of like what, you know, a lot of people are already thinking about like, you know, retiring, and this is just kind of helping to.
Are we gonna put that out to the offices and departments today, a memo that if we decide here 7%, 10%, whatever we decide, are we gonna put that out?
So the sooner that we could get direction to the offices and departments to be considering what they would reduce, I don't think that we're looking for an absolute, yes, we're gonna do a reduction exercise. Although if the board's prepared to do that, we would certainly get that out today. But I do think that we need to, there are a lot of people listening to this conversation. So they already know right now that you're looking at this and what we're talking about. And to just be clear, because everyone who's listening has not necessarily heard the conversation yesterday, where we're at is perfectly flat revenue, no extra money for new things. The board absolutely wants to do compensation for our employees. But the maintenance level, any policy level spending above what's matched with revenue, plus any compensation package has to be offset by budget cuts.
And how do we compare to others, other counties that are faced with something?
I
Do
know
you
that
folks stay in touch with your peers to
we
know what's
do.
going on?
It's been a little while since I was at a Wasack management team meeting. I know that there are other counties who are struggling with how they're gonna meet cost
I
increases the
think
next
from our
few years.
perspective as commissioners, it would be nice to know that that's a fact. that-
some
I can
counties-
certainly put a
some
question
counties
out
faced
through
that
WhatsApp.
last year.
Yes,
So we would have an answer. We're gonna get questioned by whether it's the media or constituents about, why.
absolutely.
And I think there's probably less finger pointing if it's a more universal problem, I guess, statewide.
So we can explain why revenue's flat. I mean,
Yeah.
it's only a 1% increase in property tax. That's nowhere close
But
to
that puts
covers
some
our
pressure on the
inflation.
legislature. possibly.
The decrease in other revenue to the county, including recording fees, is a big drop. So, there's downward pressure there and
The fine thing.
all of the
wasn't there a
one-time
fine
things
issue we
that
talked
had
about
been
earlier?
coming in under COVID end, and so our revenue's flat.
And I
It's
do
a-
think we ought
it's
to
a
make
revenue
kind of just a
issue.
short list of that, you know,
Yeah.
filing fees. The legislature said the judge can't impose X, Y, or Z.
Exactly.
You know, so we have something when we walk out of here, I'm not saying we need it today, but so that we can refer to this list, these reasons why
Right.
we're doing what we're doing.
And to me, it's gotta
Inflation.
be counties, because counties have a different
Right.
financing structure, so
I agree.
Olympia and Lacey might be doing something different,
Right.
and I don't care about that.
Yeah, we will definitely look at counties. We'll reach out through Wasatch.
So I know Snohomish, I was talking to Councilmember Dunn yesterday, and I was letting her know what we're going through, and I asked her how Snohomish County was doing, and you know, they're going to be doing their budget in October, and she was also saying like revenue hasn't been great even in Snohomish, right? But she's like, you know, we're gonna be able to kind of coast through, but
Not a lot of new stuff.
but there was, she
Did
was,
they have employee contracts to settle, or?
I think they didn't, so they, they weren't facing what we're kind of facing, but even with the revenue that's coming in, they were just, you know, she's just looking at the revenue, and I know they were gonna be making decision as well in October and finalizing their budget in November.
Obviously, cuts are gonna be part of the whole conversation. There's the annual budget, but I encourage the board to be surgical about that. The problem is on the general fund. It is not on the other funds, and I
I
understand.
don't
that-
wanna let our roads go to
So,
pot.
so that's what,
because of it.
so my suggestion is, if you're surgical, address the issue. Because the equity, I understand the equity, and this chart addresses the equity. But, what the board will sacrifice level of services when there's not a need, an issue with the revenue.
I'm
So
not-
it's just-
Public health is not in trouble. They're bringing in new money.
Public Works is
So,
in trouble.
Public Works does not have problematic funds,
whatever you
although they have
decide,
parks.
suggestion for you
It's
will
gotta
be
be
to
on the
be
table.
surgical about this.
So
So I would focus it on the general.
can
fund
I ask a
fund.
follow-up on that, though? When you say so I completely agree with respect to cuts. But how about the scenario which I think we're gonna face, where
Additional.
Public Works wants like, you know, tons more staff? Like, are the optics of that just too difficult? Even if they've got the money,
It is just, I believe that is too difficult.
exempt them from the cuts, but do not
And it
delay
will be
their
extremely
request for
difficult
new.
for you to have that conversation, except from the cuts, because there is not a revenue issue. And then on top of it, you add staff additional, that is just doesn't.
See, I understand the optics of it, but I also don't want to delay a lot of the foundational things that we have to do. And a lot of the requests that I know are coming through are to kind of keep the level of service that we have. I mean, you know, public health, for example, not to pick on public health, but you know, a lot of the requests that they're coming through is to just get that department in order, whether, you know, with administrative, and just keep providing that same level of service. And I don't want to delay that just because the general fund is not up to par. Like, I don't want to,
Well, that's the question.
and so you know, it's, for me, like, on my standing, I understand, but we need to cover gaps.
Where will be the sweet spot? I mean, the requests perhaps from the opposite parties are here. And I will encourage you for you to ask, what is the true business needs of those requests when you get the presentations? What are we trying to address with each position they are trying to create? And then that will give you the tools for you to make the decision, because I don't think it's all or nothing, you're right.
I mean, we've always talked about wants versus needs, and like, we're in a different situation now. It's wants, it's wants, needs, will violate state law, you know, a different category, like.
Wants,
and-
needs, bare necessities.
Wants are off the table, most needs are gonna be off the table by necessity. And we need to know between the line of like, this is a true gap, like, let's say we were contemplating a new FTE for public health. The standard's gotta be very, I mean, I wouldn't categorically say, not gonna add an FTE to public health, but the standard has to be, and I think this kind of get into what Ramiro was
that's what
saying,
the
standard has to, the bar has to be super high on
And
that.
that's the comfort level that you as a commissioner needs to reach. And it goes back to the initial comments, you need to be surgical on this, absolutely surgical when you prepare this budget.
Right, because
Public health
You're-
is a lot like public safety though.
public health
think.
is, but at the same
They didn't get
time, you
hazard
know, we're
pay during
talking
the-
about how these departments need increased FTEs to meet level of service, but that's exactly what we're impacting in these offices. You're going to impact level of service. We're not gonna be able to, we're gonna have a court backlog. It's going to increase. So access to justice level of service will go down, for example. So, you know, you're gonna have to strike a balance, and I think being very mindful of what you add to these others. Maybe they don't go through the cut exercise in a restricted fund, but I do strongly encourage that you be mindful about what gets added. So I suggest that this is a good time to break. We'll come back this afternoon to wrap up. One of the things that you may want to revisit to mitigate the size of the cut is where do you really want that fund balance to be? And we'll bring up the model again and look at how much do you have to cut to have a sustainable fund balance? And where between cash flow and target do you wanna land?
Yeah, that's the tolerance that you may want to see.
Okay, 11:12. We are in, we'll take a 15-minute break, or are we in
No,
recess?
we're
Oh,
gonna come back at
Okay.
1:30 this afternoon.
So we'll be back, we're in recess, we'll be back at 1:30.